Protoss versus Protoss. The big question, and also one which I think is very interesting because there's a lot of very interesting cannon rushes in PvP. So we've got a Win versus Kyoto to start things off with the PvP cannon rush. For anyone just joining us, this is the Cannon Rush Daily with our Grandmaster, super consistent and solid Cannon Rush player. A couple of words you don't usually see put together there. Printf here is with me, and he's basically been sharing all of his secrets, which aren't very secret because he streams under his own ID, he doesn't use a barcode, and he very openly talks about all of the different plans and ways he can adjust in different situations, and actually shows there's a lot more to Cannon Rushes than what the first assumption normally is. So yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah.
And this is your highest win rate you were saying before as well, PvP, right?
PvP, yes. It's like 85% or something this season. I don't know, something stupid like that.
Damn. Yeah, I remember someone, because I was playing a PvP against someone on ladder like a month or two ago when I first messaged you. And yeah, someone was like, you need to do a daily on it. I checked his win rate after he beat me. He has 100% so far. I think it was last season. And I was like, oh shit, really? I was like,
yeah,
okay.
I think that was the new Gettysburg season.
Oh, damn. Yeah, I bet that was a...
I was like 12-0 or something before I lost my first PvP.
Do you watch a lot of pro StarCraft?
I mean, I watched like the high-profile tournaments and stuff, but usually I actually spend more time watching kind of small streams with like 30 viewers. That's kind of the atmosphere I usually prefer.
Cool. Did you watch the Pro League finals where Zest did the worst cannon rush of all time on Gettysburg?
Oh god, yes. No, it was not potentially the worst cannon rush of all time. I actually decided Hero's cannon rush was worse.
Which Hero game was it where Hero did a bad one?
Hero versus God, who was it? It was on this map. Hero spawned in the left side. It was so bad. It was really quite atrocious.
For anyone who didn't see that Zest game, I might bring it up at the end of the VOD if I can be bothered. But basically, it was Pro League final, super important match. And Zest actually got a really good angle, I think, with his first pylon in position and his first cannon. And it was all set up perfectly, which is, perfect if your opponent pulls probes and they're like really committing to hold it and they're not stopping your cannons getting up, then they're screwed. And then he just lost his probe. And he only had brought one probe, even though he was completely all in with the cannon rush. He just didn't have a second probe, so he had no high ground vision. There were like 2 cannons on the low ground or something, and they just couldn't see anything. And then he brings another probe after like another 20-second delay. He starts moving a probe from his base, and by the time it gets there, he's got 1,500 minerals built up in the bank. And it was like, this is the most important tournament of the year for Korean players. And this is happening right now. It was like heartbreaking because Zest has had a few of these freeze up moments in big tournaments in Legacy. He goes from being like such an incredible player to, oh god, is he really making mistakes this bad right now?
I don't know if it's common knowledge, but Koreans are really bad at cannon rushing. There are 2 Korean people I've ever seen do a good cannon rush. Parting, who doesn't even really play anymore much, which is sad. I loved Parting. And Patience did one recently. It was very good. I think it was against Zest. And he did like an actually competent cannon rush and won against Zest in one of the not streamed matches at IEM. Or it was streamed, but it was like an off stream.
Right, one of the other languages, yeah.
Those are the only 2 like actually good cannon rushes I've ever seen. Patience is actually well known for messing up a cannon rush on New Gettysburg, but that wasn't actually his fault. The map they were using was different than the ladder map, and he was confused as to why the placement wasn't correct, and then he just like was too busy being confused and lost. That wasn't really his fault. And Hero and Zest, of course, both with the embarrassment.
Okay, cool. So let's answer a few questions. We can kind of ignore what's going on here just for the moment. We'll talk about it in a minute or two. But since there are a lot of questions in chat, let's answer a few of those. As I do like these shows where I've got people on to be a bit interactive and give you guys a chance to ask all the questions you want of Printf here. So how long did it take you to perfect the cannon rush, do you feel?
I haven't perfected it yet.
Good answer. MTV Viper. So that answers your question. I mean, There's just so many things you can constantly improve, right? And I assume with each expansion, you've had to go through a big kind of relearning of exactly how you want to do it in each matchup as well.
Yeah, so I didn't really play much in Wings of Liberty. I mean, I was technically in like the Wings of Liberty beta because I pre-ordered it.
Yeah.
But I didn't play much. I played like, a few games at the end of the season to like burn my bonus pool. And then at the start of the season, when I got placed in Silver League because of MMR decay, I would like play a little bit to get promoted back up to Platinum because that was where I was comfortable being. I was like, this is above average according to Blizzard percentiles, right? So I was like, all right, I'm content being Platinum. So I just sat there for Wings of Liberty. Heart of the Swarm is when I actually started like playing, and so it took me a lot of Heart of the Swarm to develop my cannon rush style, and I was actually I think beginning to become decent at it by the end. I legitimately believe my PvZ style that I had by the end of Heart of the Swarm was not balanced at all. Like I legitimately think it was not fair against Zerg.
I don't know if I disagree with that. There would be the occasion where I'd be like, I've just practiced 15 games in a row versus like cannon rushes. I'm feeling good. I can do this. And then there'd be like a slightly new wall in that like I hadn't prepared for, and I'd be like,
yeah. But then Legacy of the Void came out, and Ravagers, man. Ravagers made me so sad for months. Because my entire Heart of the Swarm style was based around kiting back to cannons. Like, there were games in Heart of the Swarm where it was, against Zerg, where it was legitimately correct to build 15 cannons in the opponent's base. Like, just in a cluster. Because then, like, no, like, if the Zerg is going Mass Roach Queen, you get, like, your stalker production going and stuff, and you just kite them, and eventually they're going to have to attack you. And when they attack you, you want a lot of cannons. So it would legitimately be correct to have 15 cannons and like 10 stalkers poking and cutting back, and eventually he attacks you and loses 15 cannons. And he has no other options but to attack you.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. But in Heart of the Swarm, he just builds Ravagers and was like,
and Legacy of the Void. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. Yeah, Legacy of the Void. He just builds Ravagers. And,
that's actually.
And then he just biles the cannons.
Yeah, that's actually so funny. I mean, so another question from Helgi. Helgi, that sounds like an Icelandic name. Helgi says, "Was Golzi your mentor?"
He was not my mentor, but he was my inspiration. I saw the Day 9 daily on Cannons, where a lot of Golzi replays were highlighted. And yeah, Golzi's my inspiration. Golzi didn't barcode, and so that was kind of my inspiration for not barcoding, for playing in the light of day, despite everyone's opinion that in order to cheese every game you have to barcode. Golzi didn't barcode, and I felt if he didn't, I wasn't going to either, and that's worked out well enough for me. Golzi and I do know each other. I'm actually a mod on his stream. He doesn't stream often, does like once or twice a year, but yeah, he has stated that he thinks I am better than he is, which, given that he doesn't play much, makes sense. If he continued playing, I don't know, maybe he would still be better than me, but he's kind of gone on to live life.
Yeah. One can only cannon rush for so many years. But it's cool. So all right, so looking at all this, a lot of people there in chat just talking about all that stuff. And here we have, so let's talk about this game a little bit before we go into a few of these PvP questions we've got in chat. So obviously, guys, I'm sorry, I know we've just been looking at the exact same rush. So let's go back to the start. First question you need to ask us, what we need to ask you is, where do we stop probes for a cannon rush here in PvP?
PvP, it's 16 probes, just like PvT.
Okay.
Again, like PvT, though, I queue up that 17th probe and cancel it if there's no rushed wall. Sometimes people rush the wall with the forge and then a gateway. That's what I call the Tesla meta, because Tesla is the first and very much kind of only person to do that to me. At Cheeseadelphia recently, Tesla was there.
Yeah.
And when I played him canning, Tesla went to him canning and was like, "Here's how you beat Printf. You do this." And so then M canning did the Tesla meta against me. I ended up winning 2-1 against him, but was rough. So I queued up that 17th probe in case there's that.
Dude, that's so sick. You're just like, yeah, you're like the, I don't know, you're like the hungry box of StarCraft or something. They're all just like, oh, I'm gonna beat this guy, his style's no fun, we're gonna like give each other advice and stuff, and then still lose. That's so sick, man. That's gonna be a good feeling when people kind of give each other some tips and then you still come out on top. GG's.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so you went for the same wall off. This time you only did 2 pylons on the low ground to block the cannon. I guess you just didn't really think you'd be able to break through in time because of the timing on the cannon and the probes coming a little bit late, or?
Let me see specifically here. I didn't have the money for it.
You didn't have the money. Okay, yeah. Cool.
2 pylons is enough to keep the cannon alive.
Because they can only hit with 1 probe there, right?
Yeah. Against Terran, any additional health on that first cannon is important. Even when a CV attacking it can be a problem because Marines can then shoot it, and that's a massive pain. But Protoss don't really have that. Even if a Zealot comes out, that's not going to kill it on its own. So if it gets hit by 1 probe, that's totally fine. You don't need a full wall like you do so much against Terran.
Yeah.
Also, a gateway is not as helpful against Protoss. Against Terran, I am not always going to cancel it to get more cannons like I did in the specific replay we were looking at.
Oh man,
so
he needed to commit harder. If he actually got this probe, it does shut down your push rate. So this is one way you can shut down the push, is if you see the opportunity and the cannon rusher kind of makes a mistake with the probes, you can target them, and if you kill them both, then if you just get rid of the cannons that are already morphing on the high ground, like it's over for you, right? Like you're in a really bad spot then.
Yeah, if I lose both my probes, it's oftentimes over, but it's not as bad as you would expect it to be, though. Like, I send a 3rd probe across the map, and it gets here, and I have, like, 800 minerals banked, and then I throw down 5 cannons.
Yeah.
And you can't kill the 5 cannons. I've actually won games like that, where I lose both my probes, and the Protoss is like, that's fine, I'm getting my Mothership Core out, I'm getting my Stalkers out, and I send another probe over, and I throw down literally 5 or 6 cannons, and then I just win the game.
I think it's something where...
stupid.
I guess they maybe if they send a probe out and see an extra probe coming, then they can react fast enough. But it's one of those things where I think a lot of the time people think, oh, I've held the push, and they kind of start going back on like a let's get back on track for a normal game. So like I think it's one of those things where technically I'm sure if they responded super seriously and respected the follow-up push, they should be able to stop it. But that's the thing, right? Is it's so easy to miscalculate in these situations because as you've been saying all day, and something I always like to say is, there's no such thing as a perfect game in StarCraft. A common mistake we talk about at big tournaments is players trying to play too perfect. And the guy who takes a few more chances and forces mistakes out of the other guy, often comes out on top. I think like Dark versus Byun at BlizzCon is kind of an example of that, though to be fair, Reapers were pretty good, so I can kind of understand why he played a bit overly safe. But there's been other situations many times throughout the history of StarCraft where there's like this strong macro player who does that too much, whereas usually the guys who have made insane legacies for themselves have mixed in a bit more of the YOLO. Like even Stefano had big wins in his career where a lot of the way through a bracket he'd just do these like Roach Bane timings, like big Roachling timings off like 1.5 base economy, mixed in there to kind of force mistakes and make himself more dangerous. And MVP as well would do these like really hard rushes to try and damage his opponents, and make it so you couldn't just take as many chances against him. So it's always good to have that variety. So anyway, once you get the cannon rush up, he focuses so much on trying to defend with catching your probes. So that's one approach. The other is, what if they just focus on doing it the way Bratok did it in his game, where let's say Kyoto just kills this cannon on the high ground, and then as this cannon on the low ground finishes, just backs off. Is there a way to defend by putting pylons here for overcharge, or do you just have to build gateways at the back out of range and get stalkers out? Does any of that work?
So that is kind of like what I guess would be considered the standard response, right? Like pull workers, slim it down a little bit, get a zealot out to deny really greedy cannons, get stalkers into pylon and mothership form, overcharge it. That's kind of the standard response, I guess. I guess it can work if you play it correctly, but in my experience, most of the time it does not. most of the time, if unless I get really slowed down at the start by the probes, or I misclick a bunch of cannons, not quite protected by my first one or whatever, and the result slows me down a lot. Unless I make kind of stupid mistakes like that, I feel like you just cannot actually get up in time, because 3 cannons will beat a pylon.
Yeah.
2 cannons will beat it if it's this pylon's a little bit delayed. I can build way more than 3 cannons basically.
Yeah.
If I want to, and if I'm not slowed down a lot. So I think in general that kind of response, the standard response, does not work, and that's why it feels so hard to defend this in PvP, because that is the most intuitive, natural, standard response to it, and I don't think it works.
That's been my experience trying to do that. I've seen it work, every now and then in a pro game where it's not the greatest cannon rush. So you kind of think, well, I've seen Zest hold off Super's cannon rush or something like this in so-and-so Pro League match, and I didn't really look at the specifics, but maybe that will work. So anyway, let's hop into the... I mean, this one's over. You win. We already saw this. Let's hop into the loss and continue talking about this. And while we hop into that next game, I'll just fast forward to the end of this one so people can see the Nexus and the probes die. Have that little bit of closure. GG's. All right. So what happens, and this is a few people have asked this in chat, funnily enough, what do you do if they cannon rush you while you're cannon rushing them? Oh, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Yep.
Okay.
I can hear you fine now. It's all good.
Cool. Okay, so your statement of that is a little bit vague. Do you mean defensive forge or forge first, like they're actually cannon rushing me?
So let's talk about the first scenario. Let's assume they're offensively cannon rushing you as well. Like your probes pass in in the middle of the map very early, and you're both like, that's a very early probe.
I actually have 2 very recent replays of that. Actually, no, I guess only one really. I have one recent replay of that, of me playing against Tripsail. I don't know if you know him, but he's a French GM cannon rusher.
Cool.
Who actually, I named a build after him in HOTS because, well, it was his build, and then I kind of stole it, and it was amazing. It truly the best build ever created for PvP. I got a draw against Pulse with it. It was amazing. You literally built your first pylon next to the Terran Command Center, and then you built a gateway and a forge there.
Really?
It was fantastic. Yeah.
That's one thing I noticed about HOTS is the ability to actually proxy your first pylon, in your opponent's base because of the way, the start was much slower. And have that actually be a choice. Okay, cool. So let's focus on this game, and then we'll come back to that cannon rush versus cannon rush problem, because I would love to hop into one of those replays and talk about it there. So considering that's been a few people have asked that question, let's talk about it. So here we see he's going for what I consider to be the better way to hold. Let's take down the pylons. Let's try and block. And that beautiful little patrolling probe. However, what you've been talking about all day is it's never just one position where you can cannon rush, right? You always have multiple different angles. And what's really interesting here, so I'm going to go back just a little bit, is you actually do build 2 pylons on the high ground here, right?
Okay, yeah. So it's worth noting here, my first pylon is actually 1 hex too far to the left. So the low ground wall that I was trying to make wasn't actually possible to make, so I improvised some other thing that didn't actually end up working. So that low ground cannon does end up falling. This cannon isn't as far right as it's supposed to be able to be. This gateway, therefore, doesn't wall with the Vespene geyser, and everything goes wrong.
So that pylon's going to be 1 hex to the right. I'm just showing this just in slow-mo for people who might be just finding it harder to follow on the stream. So that pylon's meant to be 1 hex to the right. Small mistake there. Of course, this is the only way Printf ever loses games, guys, when he makes a mistake.
I mean, you were before this. You were asking for replays where I don't make any big mistakes and I lose anyway. But there are no replays where I don't make mistakes.
Exactly.
Like, there are no games where I win and I don't make mistakes. There are no games where I lose and I don't make mistakes. I can always find an excuse.
Exactly. But no, so that's cool. So that gateway, it would have had a really sexy wall. And then the probes would have had to go around the assimilator and then come behind. And if that cannon was 1 space to the right...
It would actually be 1 right and 1 down.
1 right and 1 down. And then with a single pylon? Does that...
No, it would be 2 pylons.
Okay, two
I would
pylons on the right. Okay.
Yeah.
But you only have to build those if your opponent pulls probes down. So even though it's an expensive wall, it's like it's a reactive wall. So you only have to build that if you see them really committing to try to take it down.
Yeah. So this doesn't like go quite according to plan, but yeah, Bisc is doing basically what I think is correct to respond to a cannon rush, which is block the placements, be very annoying, chase my probes. I screw up and lose one. It's not one that I had to lose, but it's very hard to actually keep your probes alive while cannon rushing.
And there's a lot of bonus points you can get as well with chasing these probes, right? Like, where like just clicking a probe or two on it is nice, but if you're actually trying to cut it off on the corners and do more damage, the same way as when a probe is like pylon blocking a hatchery going down. Each time it's kind of turning, you want to cut it off, because if your units are just A-moved on it, like these probes right now, we see they just circle it. But if you find extra APM and you're actually moving those probes, like one of those probes off to kind of cut off the angle you know it's going to turn on, then you can get a few more hits off and stop it doing fancy little maneuvers like what we saw just there. And this is so cool, though. You can see there's just so much flexibility. Like, I'm not talking about it in binary terms, and neither are you, because it's not just, oh, you always just do a circular motion with your probe and then curve back and try to do this exact wall. This is something you're very fluidly improvising based on how your opponent's moving their probes and the potential wall-off locations that are available to you. We see you here saying, the high ground wall's not going to work. Let's rotate back to the low ground and try to make that work now. And even though it's not going as well as you would have liked, because it kind of failed at the start, we can see there's a lot of different sort of transitionary options, and there's so many opportunities for your opponent to screw up their reaction and then fall apart and just lose. Yeah.
He basically won the game like a minute in with the blocking of the low ground and me screwing up the place and everything. So after this, it was just, will he screw up and let me get a cannon up quickly enough to win the game?
Yeah.
And he didn't, because Disc is a very good player, so he didn't make any of those mistakes. But I had to give him the opportunity to make them. I had to at least try.
Yeah. That pylon's too close for him, isn't it? Like, it'll get spotted if you bring your probe up, or?
No, that's that range of the cannon.
Are you sure? It's so hard to tell because of the low ground, high ground.
Yeah, the low ground, high ground does make it trickier, but I'm pretty sure that's out of range, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know your shit. You see, that's something like, for people who don't have as much practice in this, it's really hard to tell when there's like a building on that angle. They're like, oh, how many hexes is that? I can't actually tell. But yeah, okay, cool. So we saw here just really good probe blocking, lots of harassing and trying to kill your probes while blocking your key locations. And of course, a little bit fortunate in that you did make a bit of a mistake here. So if your pylon was in the correct position, Disc actually would have needed to take his defense one step higher. He would have needed to pull even more probes. So if I want to look at this from Disc's point of view, I would say, Disc, you really should be probably, I guess 2 on gas is not the worst thing, but I almost would say you need to focus so much on the initial defense, it might be best to just pull off gas completely and just pull an extra 3 probes and really be blocking every possible location, because I don't think there's such a thing as an overreaction, and I do think people do underreact a little bit too much to cannon rushes. I feel like the moment you see a second probe especially, it's like, well, you really need to be sure of what's going on. So a couple of little tips from what I would suggest for people, and you can let me know and weigh in at the end if you think these are correct or anything you'd like to add, is number 1, the moment I see a pylon in my base, I think pulling probes like this is a great idea. But I want to check, is this a fake? How committed is this? So the next thing I would do is I would immediately grab one of my probes and I would actually send it to sit out front my natural, or I would search my natural and then sit out front, because the moment I see a second probe, that's when I can go from, this is probably a really committed cannon rush, I want to react hard, to this is a really committed cannon rush, I need to just pull everything and defend. Like, I just need to stop this from getting up. Do you think that's the correct sort of way to think about it?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do if I see the pylon going down is I would send 1 probe on attack move around the corners of my base, just in case this is like a fake decoy pylon and there's another cannon rush going on somewhere else. Some people are really sneaky like that.
Yeah.
So I would immediately aim move around the corners of my base. And then, yeah, I mean, people do like fake a cannon rush sometimes, but I don't think that's even remotely as common as an actual cannon rush. So I don't think it's worth giving that too much thought. So I'd probably just like immediately just respond, assuming it's a full-on forced cannon rush.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And the next thing would be to block every possible spot. So it's to be, the moment you see these pylons, you're already envisioning where are the spots, where are the potential spots. And it's never just one location. We always get lazy and we get in this idea of, oh yeah, this is the one spot I have to worry about, that, you know, that spot on the left next to the ramp. But thinking about this, there is a nice tight little wedged in area below that gas and the wall there. There's also these little high ground areas. With these two pylons, it's really just to the high ground to the right of this pylon. But then because you actually lose a pylon on the high ground as well, it opens up more space for another potential wall in where you end up going. So I, as a disc here, would say you actually need to have 2 or 3 probes on that low ground. One holding position below the assimilator, another one kind of patrolling or holding position where his first probe is on that low ground. And I think that's what would probably solidify his defense and make your job even harder.
Yeah, I entirely agree. I think you should have multiple probes on the low ground. You should have a probe like everywhere. Anywhere that is touching the edge of a cliff, you should have a probe, because unless you're like a really experienced cannon rusher, you're not going to be able to see all the walls perfectly.
Yeah.
So assume that you're missing some. So literally anything that's even touching a cliff, just put a probe there.
1, 2, 3.
It's not worth the risk.
Probes. I think that's really it. And the thing is, a lot of people sometimes get in the mindset of, oh, I can't just, have 3 probes just sitting there in hold position. It's like, yeah, you can, just for 20 seconds or so. And if the cannon rush isn't happening, then, you can go back to doing normal things. But especially when you're not an absolute expert in recognizing things, I like what you say there about it's better to overreact a little bit, because if you miss something, well, bam, it's lights out. If you put 1 extra probe down there and it wasn't necessary, oh, you lost 30 minerals. It's not the end of the world. So I think it's always going to be better to play a little bit safer and overreact to that. So that's cool. All right, so this was a really good successful hold from Disc after that successful one. Let's hop out of this replay. Let's take a look at that Cannon Rush versus Cannon Rush while we talk about that, because I think that's really interesting.
All right, yeah. So I'll you'll have to make me leader, and then I'll get the replay of me versus Crypto.
Promote to leader, done. I'm going to see if there's any other questions. Someone was saying, what do you think about using Time Warp in PvP when the mothership core goes?
The game against Crypto, I think, was on the last patch.
Oh, that's okay.
Because there was a patch recently.
No worries. You know what?
I can, however,
yeah,
do a game against Raze where he was playing Protoss and he went Forge first against me.
Let's just take a look at it while we talk about this, and we can obviously talk about other scenarios. So that'll be cool. Random question from New Guy Nauticals. He said, what do you think about using Time Warp when the mothership core gets to the Terran's base or the opponent's base? So I'm guessing he means just as Time Warp on the workers to like slow down their mining. So after a cannon rush, you've got them contained on one base, your mothership core comes over to reinforce the front. Is it worth ever dropping a Time Warp on the drone line? Good idea or no?
I mean, someone did the math on this in HOTS, and it loses the opponent like 20 minerals. That was in HOTS when Time Warp was longer. So I don't think that's worth it.
Really? 20 minerals? That's funny.
Something ridiculously small like that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably not worth it then. There's a few people requesting a show match between us. Other people earlier were saying Vibe considers Cannon Rush a free win, so they want to see you play against him. What's interesting here, guys, is
I have played Vibe.
I often consider it, pretty bad as well, but I don't play Printf much, and a lot of the time I look at the replay and say, yeah, this is I think this is pretty bad. And I was talking about this earlier in the show, and then I go, oh, he actually made a really big mistake here and here, and I go, oh, okay, like if he didn't do those, things get a lot more complicated. So I think it's definitely something where it's easy for anyone to say something is bad or this is not good in StarCraft, and very rarely is that actually the whole story, right? That's just, the game is so complex. Nothing is as binary as people would like it to say. Every time a player makes a statement that's absolute about something, people like to like really grab onto it and be like, oh, so I think ultimately none of us know everything about the game, so yeah. Who knows? I can try to get a Cannon Rush show match going sometime, but I don't think we should read too much into someone saying, "Oh, this is bad," or "This is good," and this is right, that's wrong," kind of thing.
Yeah. So in hindsight, I should have made you host, but I didn't think of that. So
Okay, that's
now
right.
I'm controlling the replay.
That's right. You get to steer us through this replay. So go back to like kind of when the rush starts, and I'm gonna lock it on your player camera, and yeah, just talk us through the cannon rush. So it's business as usual. Same thing we saw in the previous 2 games. Take it away.
Yeah, so Raze here goes for a Forge first to metagame me. He sends out no probes, so it's not like he was going to cannon rush me. So he goes for a Forge and a Gateway Wall, but it's kind of like the Tesla meta that I was talking about, except late, so it doesn't block my probe out. So the first thing I do when I see my opponent has a Forge is I just drop pylons in seemingly random locations spread out across the base. I also, of course, scout my own base to see if I'm being cannon rushed.
Which one's the real pylon?
Yeah, so he pulls probes for my first pylon, so I just cancel it. He loses more money there. I can pick whichever pylon I want. So I've got a nice walled-in cannon here. I've got a pylon at the bottom left that finishes. My second probe arrives and sees that he's walled off, so I just start attacking his pylon.
Can you go back and just show us the pop-out probe maneuver? Because there are, I know, like me and you, we play thousands of games of StarCraft and we get used to knowing these details. But if you can just show that pop-out maneuver where you put down the cannon again and just explain that just for any newer players, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So basically, here I just I get the nice 3 pylon wall up, and then I put my probe in the top left of that little space, and then I build the cannon. And the cannon is now in the same space as the probe, and that's obviously not allowed. So the probe gets pushed to the nearest open space, which in this case is actually outside the wall. So it gets pushed through the pylons and gets to safety and freedom, and then you can go around and build more cannons.
Nice. And that worked out really well.
Yeah, so here he's building a lot of cannons to defend. I'm building my own cannons. I decide to try and defeat his cannons with my cannons here. Yeah. I don't know if that was the correct call. The alternative would be to target down probes. Yeah. Both of these are viable. Here I, in fact, thought that one of his cannons was mine, and it wasn't. This one that's about to finish here. I thought that was mine.
Yeah, I thought that was too.
That wasn't mine. So now I decided to start targeting down probes because I realize I'm not breaking his cannons. So I target down some probes, get some nice kills there, and then I go cannon rush the other side.
And he doesn't have a pylon there, so he does not have a cannon response this time. And now, really, at this point, I feel like his only chance is to focus down your probe. And even then, that cannon would still be in range of 1 mineral patch, which is pretty disastrous since he has no gas. He can't build stalkers.
Also, his pylon at the ramp was about to fall.
Oh. Yep, okay. And then when that probe gets in there, all hell breaks loose anyway. So, GG's. Okay, cool. So I do like what you said there about that decision, by the way. If you could just rewind to when the cannon rush starts, just so we have something on screen while we continue to talk.
Yeah, sure.
Some eye candy for the viewers. Basically the decision there with the cannon versus probes, just to highlight what you said, I think you explained it really well. I really like that idea of if you can break their cannons, then obviously you focus down their cannons, because they're the, if you beat their cannons, you've got cannons next to the mineral line, you win the game. However, if you aren't going to win the fight, and we saw you have to make that decision, that realization, focus down the probes, do economy damage, and transition into a different focal point of aggression or transition yourself. But yeah, so I definitely like the way you talked about that. Obviously, this is an odd situation because he's trying to defend with cannons. Let's talk a little bit about what people were asking about. So what if you go start cannoning his base, or what if your probes pass each other, you kind of get to his base, you put a pylon down, you see he doesn't have a gateway, he's got a forge, there's a probe building a pylon in your main base. What the hell happens? Do you defend more or attack more or try to do both?
Yeah, so that's basically, until I saw his gateway go down, which I don't even know if I saw that with my first probe or my second one, I have to assume that's what's happening here. I have to assume, because I'm bad, that I just didn't notice his probes passing mine on the way to my base. Or maybe he went around, like I can't know that.
Yeah.
So well, okay, this game I kind of assume that he's metagaming, but in general, you would just send a single probe around the outskirts of your base looking for a cannon rush. If there's a cannon rush, you defend it with like probes and maybe a defensive cannon. But in general, so there's this player named Murmur, or Murmur UK, is his Twitch handle. In HOTS, who basically became my protege, and he got to GM by using my builds and stuff. And we actually spent a while practicing cannon wars against each other. And we determined that it is actually correct in a cannon versus cannon situation to be the aggressor. This was contrary to both of our intuitions, but we determined that it was correct to actually just attack with cannons, because it's like, I mean, as this game shows, like, it's really hard to not die to that.
Yeah.
So even if he had probes in my base, and this happened in the game against Tripcell that unfortunately was on the previous patch, like, he kind of tries to cannon me a little bit, but he doesn't commit too much to it because he's busy trying to defend against my aggression. But you can force a lot of resources to be necessary to the commitment with a few SCV, a few probes and cannons. If you both choose to aggress, it can get really weird, but then you're doing the same thing, so you can't say that you're making a mistake, right? If you aggress and the opponent defends, then I think you are favored, because in that case, your opponent is basically, I mean, it's like this game, right? Except that he's got a probe across the map. So I think that aggression is correct.
Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense, because ultimately, if you try to defend, you're either pulling all your probes to defend, and they're just building pylons, and they can transition out of it a little bit smoother, I feel. Or if you try to defend with your own cannons, that's never going to work, because of exactly what we see in this game, where you get to choose where to commit, and they're always going to be like, oh, I've got to kind of have a pylon next to each. But the thing is, if you're reacting with cannons, your cannons are going down later. So every second your cannons are later means you need to put more cannons, you need to pull probes. And I feel like the offensive player can always force a bigger reaction, right? So that's actually really funny, that you guys actually practice cannon versus cannon. You came to this realization like, oh, you just got to attack. And it definitely could end up in a draw situation, right? If both of you lose your Nexi, you don't get 400 minerals out to build another one. It could end up in a draw, or it could end up you both get 400 minerals, and whoever preserves more probes and gets them to the other side of the map, and you take each other's bases, and you kind of reset and play a normal game, or something like that.
Yeah, the games get weird.
That's cool. Okay, that's actually really fascinating.
All right. Also, if you're doing the aggression here and you decide that the cannon rush is just not working, your aggression is failing, what you can do is, I mean, the opponent won't really know when you're transitioning out of it. So you can like start transitioning back home, and they're forced to continue like focusing entirely on defending, because they don't know when you're going to suddenly throw down 5 cannons at once or something, right? And also you can gas steal, because gas stealing in PvP is huge.
Oh.
So if you can steal a gas geyser and like transition out of that from there, because you've already got probe in their base, that can also be really good. And even if you don't get cannons up in range of anything critical, just having like a few cannons in the corner of the base, and then proxying like stalkers and or immortals from there, and like microing with the cannons to help your army. Because like even if they don't hit the nexus, they'll have range close to the nexus.
Yeah.
So you can shoot the nexus from relative safety, and then you can like kill the nexus from there. And even if the cannons don't visibly shoot anything, they can actually still be very valuable.
That's awesome. Sorry, my stream's getting excited. Hey, Sean. Good morning, man. Good morning. You've just excited a whole lot of nerds watching a StarCraft video. Sorry, I know you can't see Printf, but yeah, just my shirtless housemate in the background, getting Twitch chat a little bit randy, a little bit excited. So all good, all in a day's stream there. Awesome. I think we've had a really good kind of talk today. Wiedemann's just brought out some friggin' crazy maths there for the cannon or probe targeting decision, which I'm not even going to try to read, because that doesn't even make sense to my brain. Because if you try to do maths on stream, it never works. But
yeah, bad idea.
But that's really cool to have Wiedemann's in chat as well. Of course, also another guy who streams a lot of Cannon Rush play. I'm gonna be a little bit get some Cannon rivalry going. Who's the better player out of you two, or who has the higher MMR? Do you guys know? Is there an EP measuring?
From my bias perspective,
yeah,
I have the higher MMR without a barcode, and I won, I think, the last 4 head-to-heads.
All right, okay. So
from my bias perspective,
if Wiedemann's feels like he wants to reclaim, that title, try and take it off you, then maybe at some point he can hit me up when he's ready, and I'll sponsor a little show match between you guys. We can see some cannons. It'd be really funny if both of you just don't cannon rush and just like play standard games. And I'm like, what is this?
Like, he'll never see this coming.
Yeah, you both just like mind games. Awesome. All right. So thank you so much for coming on. I think we talked about a pretty good range of stuff. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about or add kind of before we close out the show?
I don't think so. I think you covered quite a bit.
Awesome, man. I think this was really cool. And, you know, as with anything in StarCraft, I don't think anything is ever complete. There's always more cool things that come up. I'm sure there's nifty spots on maps which we didn't cover. There's always new interesting things with everything in StarCraft. It's a limitless game. So anyway, thanks heaps for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. If you can do me a favor and type there in Discord your Twitter link and like stream and stuff, just so I can post those in Twitch chat, put those in the YouTube video comments as well. And while you do that, just, yeah, let everyone know where they can follow you. And yeah.
All right. Yeah. So basically, I stream at twitch.tv/QuasarPrintf. I have a new fancy schedule for this semester. So I'm streaming 4 days a week. One of those days, though, is not StarCraft. So I imagine most people don't care about that. But Saturdays, Mondays, and Tuesdays, I am streaming StarCraft. And the details on when on those days are all visible on my stream, which again is twitch.tv/QuasarPrintf. I'll type something in chat so you can see how that's written.
Awesome. Already linked it in there for you. But thank you so much for coming on, man. It was a pleasure. I wasn't exactly sure how today's show would go. Obviously, we talked for a very long time because we just kind of had fun with it, which is cool. I'll split it into 3 videos, one for PvZ, one for PvT, one for PvP. And yeah, hopefully that helps everyone out. So guys watching on stream, thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate all the support. If you guys watching on Twitch, don't go anywhere. I will be playing some random ladder. For everyone watching on YouTube, don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a walrus, and of course, punch a cactus to the moon. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye and good night. All right. YouTube VOD is